Well, I would like to say, first of all, that we, on behalf of the Foreign Office and DFID joint Sudan unit, were delighted to come and speak today. As both of the speakers have mentioned, DFID has been involved in financing the studies that they have been discussing. So we have a long-term interest in what's come out of them. I'd also like to say that my knowledge on pastoralism is deep, and I could talk on it until the camels and cows came home. But unfortunately, I can't. So my thoughts will just be one of an expert sitting in London, reading the studies and then relating it back to the discussions that we're having in country in terms of both the politics and the programming. So firstly, I just wanted to echo the point made by Sarah, but I think also with Helen in a quick discussion beforehand about the commonality of the issues that have come out, and also some of the approaches that the researchers used to elicit their findings, getting out into the field, getting right down into the grassroots, this kind of action on research approach that we strongly support. We also are quite keen to really delve into the analysis and to use the work and the results that they've come up with as we take forward our work with both the communities, the government, and also the international community. I think both of them touched on implications of this for the way that the multilateral presence works in Sudan, both in Darfur and in the three areas, and in fact more broadly with UNMISS, and also the way the humanitarian organisations are configured, where they are, what they do, what they respond to in terms of drivers. So we think that there's a wealth of information for use by multiple actors as we continue to move forward in Sudan. I think at face value, what the research shows us that there's an ongoing dynamic in both the areas of the Rizagat and the Misriya at the local level. So while we are taking a historical perspective to understand the drivers to why we have the sedentarization and some of the livelihood maladaptive strategies that we now see, this is not a set picture, because the political change in Sudan is ongoing, because people's livelihoods continue to adapt. This is something which is local level, but it is also it will continue to move forward, and communities will continue to be impoverished and marginalised, and pastoralism will continue to be challenged unless we are able to effectively engage with the groups and to find strategies, livelihood strategies for them, which are more suited to their needs and also the environment within which they live. So I would like to say that this participatory kind of work is really important to understand and ultimately reverse some of the issues of marginalisation and discrimination that they've been describing. I'd also just like to say to Tufts that one of the things that they did in producing the work was at an interim stage to engage with the Council for Nomadic Development with some of the research ideas. And I think in that way of engaging with an aspect of the government, in a non-threatening way, it enabled the government to come back with some balanced and thoughtful responses to the research, which perhaps can create a inclusive livelihoods agenda that we can work on jointly with the authorities in Sudan, because this can't be us imposing a solution. There has to be something which is jointly owned and comes from within. So that kind of engagement and outreach through the process of research can be very valuable in enabling us to actually then respond in a similarly engaging way. I think just in general the studies do illustrate that the issues are long-term and they're complicated, and that they've taken place over different time frames to the time frames of the current conflicts that we are heavily engaged in trying to resolve and find solutions to. So it kind of suggests that there are some deeper drivers rather than those that are necessarily on the front pages of our newspapers that we need to understand. So as such, the studies provide quite a necessary corrective picture to the immediacy of some of the lobbying and the politics around Sudan, and suggest that any political solution has to address the longer-term problems, as well as the current displacement and environmental degradation. So after those introductory comments, I wanted to say that, in fact, the studies raise themes that have great resonance with the new white paper that DFID has put out on behalf of the British government. It's called Securing Our Common Future, and it looks a lot at the interplay of sort of conflict and development and security, and says quite a bit about how the government, our government, can work in situations such as we find in Sudan. And it talks a lot about sustaining our common future, for example, looking at issues of climate change and focusing on sustainable livelihoods, sustainable humanitarian responses, which will only come about if we are more responsive to some of the issues identified, and also about transforming our impact by transforming the way we work, so integrating sort of conflict-sensitive approaches into the way that we program. So moving from the general to a couple of rather more specific examples. Next week, Gareth Thomas, who's the Minister of State at DFID, is planning to travel to Sudan. And one of the things he'll be looking at is a new partnership agreement that DFID is signing with UNEP, the United Nations Environment Programme, for quite a significant amount of money. That will, in many ways, directly respond to some of the issues, in particular that the Tufts study came up with, because it were working in Darfur. And there's quite a considerable sustainable livelihoods component to this that will deliberately set out to look at livelihoods and to promote sort of a peaceful interaction between different livelihood groups through looking at alternative energy programming, alternative livelihood strategies, and also looking at some of the issues of trading that you touched upon, market opportunities, the inability of people to use their traditional trading and markets, which we're very pleased that Tufts will continue to be able to do some research and work as part of this broader programme. So I think that's should be a tangible way of putting into practice and drawing upon the research, and obviously we'll look to see what that produces. Secondly, in the three areas, and as Sarah says, that we funded the work with the Miseria to kind of really start to understand the concerns of these groups, who both themselves see them to have been sort of losers in a sense from the agreement of the comprehensive peace agreement, and who feel rather excluded and invisible from the discourse on what kind of development dividend could possibly be provided following the signing of the peace agreement. I think the work has illustrated many extremely useful things, and has also facilitated the coming together of a steering committee between the government, the donors, and some of the agencies on the ground for really a frank discussion around some of the issues that have arisen to look at concretely what can be done. And I think the time is upon us to act as we move towards the probable referendum in 2011, and before that the popular consultation and the elections, where we have opportunities for quite considerable governance change, and communities who may feel quite excluded from the processes that are going on around them, and disincentivised to engage themselves in those processes, which could offer a way for them to become back engaged in society. So I think that the study stimulated work on the steering committee, and that in itself is also now stimulating a possible programme with the US and other countries to do some programming in the three areas targeted at geographical areas that have been untargeted. So to get out into Mugla, to get out into the communities, to bring health and education and services that are tailored to meet the needs of those communities, and really to start a participatory process of dialogue with the communities that could, in essence, move forward through the period of the elections, the referendum, into some form of Sudan, whatever that ends up taking. So I just wanted to say a few things about the common themes, therefore, I think that are coming through for us. One is this kind of plea to take a longer term time frame, which we really wholeheartedly agree with. we're trying to take our time to understand the historical underpinnings of where we are, and then to factor that into some slightly longer-term commitments in Sudan in terms of programming. So the unit program will be 3 years to start with, but I think one can envisage that becoming a more sort of taking on a sustainable form. Similarly, the program in the 3 areas, the intention is certainly there for a sort of commitment to the communities, which is not a 6-month build a clinic and then leave. A second common theme is in the way we're doing our trying to do recovery programming. For example, in Darfur through the Community Peace and Stability Fund, to really build in a process of consultation with communities, to move them through processes of reconciliation, and then to only do programming once the basis of reconciliation and community ownership is in place. I think the similar sorts of principles will apply when we get into the 3 areas. I think we also quite clearly feel that there are no quick fixes to this. So whilst I've said there are a number of programmatic approaches coming forward, we would be the last, I think, to feel that they would be the end of the process. They're a critical start. There's extensive amounts of outreach to civil society, creating a civil society in some of these areas, and a domestic one, and also partnering with international civil society, which maybe is less present than it has been, and looking at how to get that effectively established with appropriate support internationally and from the government. And also how to draw upon the outcomes of this consultation into the political process. So I think a good example of that is, again, in Darfur, the Darfur Dialogue and Consultation that we've been separately supporting does overlap. The issues that they're finding in their consultations have great resonance with some of the issues that have come up in these studies. So as we look to move forward the overarching political process for Darfur, to make sure it's underwritten by an understanding of the issues the communities wish to see resolved, so we end up with a peace process that sticks and can be brought into at all levels of society. And so just finally then, a couple of challenges and questions. I think we all remain, everything I've said, quite challenged by how to institutionalise this kind of research, how to really take it in and turn it into sort of multilateral mandates, how to turn it into, and then also have the skills to deliver, how to turn it into sort of bilateral programming, how to get civil society to own the concepts and be responsive. And I think also how to bring the research to the government in a way that they can engage with it. And I think we've seen some good examples in both the 3 areas and Darfur of that, but there's undoubtedly much more to be done. And then that naturally leads on to what does this mean for the sort of the bigger political processes, the CPA as it reaches the concluding period, and Darfur peace process. I'd also, just looking at the audience, be interested in any reflections that you have on the findings, for how we could use them in the programming that we're putting together. So we're definitely listening at this period. Well, we're always listening, but in particular at this point, because we're looking at new programming. And then finally, a kind of a question back to the researchers. What does it actually mean for the people that you've been writing about? How can they pick it up? Do they understand it as a description of themselves? Can they use it for advocacy? Can they use it for engagement and improving the governance of their own lives? So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jane.